All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started. This can be kind of a casual sort of presentation if you guys have questions. Again, my name is Justin Wester. I'm the Director of Operations at Chai One. Chai One has nothing to do with smart home technologies. This is more a passion of mine. Really got into this probably about 2 years ago, right around the time I had identical twin daughters, and I was thinking, what cool baby cams can I put in their nursery? And it kind of blossomed out from there. So if you were a child in the 80s or had children in the 80s, you may recognize this television set. This is Pee-wee's Playhouse. What does Pee-wee's Playhouse have to do with home automation or smart home technology? Well, his entire set was kind of a Rube Goldberg machine. He could press a button and then all these events would occur. And that really inspired me at an early age, despite what happened to Pee Wee Herman after the fact, after he lost his television show. I thought that was kind of forward thinking in the 80s. So that's the reason why I've got that on the initial slide. So the stuff that I want to talk about, first, what are some of the technologies behind the smart home boom that we see today? There are a few that have really come on the scene in the past couple of years. Some have been around for the better part of a decade. We'll talk through what those are. And then as far as interesting use cases today, there are actually a lot of products on the market to where you can automate your home or make it more intelligent. But in the future, there are going to be a lot more of those applications. And it's because of some of these enabling technologies which are going to mature over time. So we'll go through some of those future use cases as well. Then as far as other technologies to watch, these aren't just straight down the fairway smart home type tech, but they're ancillary, I guess kind of auxiliary technologies to that, to where something like a solar or electric vehicle charging may have some applicability in making your home smart. Then I'm going to tell a little story about the day in the life of my smart home to make it maybe a bit more real. It's kind of a hypothetical day, although most of the events I'm going to talk about actually occurred this morning. And then finally, I'll talk about some of the areas I go to online to get information about this stuff. So if you guys are interested and you want to start enabling your home to get quote-unquote smart, maybe you can go down that path. So what are some of these enabling technologies that are really blossoming right now? The first is Bluetooth Low Energy, or Bluetooth 4.0. The idea behind this is that you can send short bursts of data that aren't voluminous in size, but they use very little energy. And so when you have something like a modern smartphone or a modern tablet, come on in folks, how you doing? No worries. So if you have something that has Bluetooth 4.0 inside it, you have this opportunity to create a mesh network within your house to spit data packets between each other. And there's this notion of proximity awareness when you have Bluetooth-enabled devices. If you get closer to a device, it knows where you are in 3D space, and you can trigger some interesting events within your house. Another one of the technologies within the past 18 months or so that are really enabling some of the smart home tech is 802.11ac Wi-Fi. This is the next generation of Wi-Fi. It's the successor to 802.11n. And what's really interesting about 802.11ac is in the past, when you have a Wi-Fi hotspot or a router, it kind of spits a signal out in concentric circles. So depending on where you have that router positioned within your house, you may have good signal or bad signal, high data speeds or low data speeds. With 802.11ac, you can actually do a focused stream, or beam forming is what it's called, to where if you have a security camera in the corner of your house and maybe one on the other side of the house, your router, if it's 802.11ac, can spit beams to those and make sure that you're getting the sort of bandwidth you need to enable those applications. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't pay some lip service to some historical protocols that were really the foundation of the home automation movement the better part of a decade or longer ago. So these are all, by and large, proprietary formats, or were at one time, things like Z-Wave and X10. If you were on the internet about a decade ago, you probably remember getting pop-ups for X10 video cameras, right? Enable your house with home security. They were kind of spammy about it, but they did a lot of really innovative stuff at a low cost. You could get something like an X10 video camera for the better part of 25 bucks. They're even lower now. So these were really meant to be patchwork solutions to be able to make devices communicate within your house. If your smoke detector needed to talk to your thermostat, needed to talk to your security camera, there was no existing protocol, so these pioneers kind of had to write their own. And you'll still see a lot of products in the home automation space today that show that they support these protocols. Now, another technology that's really enabling this is gigabit ISPs. Now, Google Fiber is probably the most notable of those. They got a lot of press when they went to Kansas, when they went to Austin or announced plans to build out there. But what's unique about these gigabit ISPs is you no longer have to worry about that uplink back to the cloud. So if you have security cameras placed all around your property, like I do, you can push the video camera rolling nonstop or that video footage up to the cloud and not worry about having your bandwidth constrained. So something like a drop cam, which I'll talk about a bit later in the presentation, if you have this pointed at your front door and it's recording 24/7, you could use the better part of 25 to 50 gigabytes within a month. So if you have 5 of these around your house, imagine how quickly that adds up. If you don't have a strong uplink connection enabled by something like a gigabit ISP, you're really going to hit the ceiling of your connection quickly. Now, this is the Xbox Connect for the Xbox One. This isn't a video game presentation. I think there are 4 of those going on right now. So if you're interested in that, you'd be somewhere else. But what's unique about this Connect is the voice and motion recognition that it enables in a really fluid way. So you're going to be seeing a deluge of these commercials over the next coming weeks for the Xbox One, talking about how just normal folks are sitting down in their living rooms and saying, Xbox, turn on TV, or Xbox, show me the Texans game. And so you're interacting and manipulating your environment around you, not by pushing buttons on your smartphone or virtual buttons, not by using a traditional remote control. You're either waving your hand to activate some activity or you're speaking in a natural language way to enable something to occur in your house. So I want to talk about things that you can actually get today. I'm the kind of guy who's a futurist at heart, I think, and so I will talk kind of prognosticating into the future a lot of times, but that doesn't help you today. So if you're interested in doing something in a smart home today, what does it look like? And I want to talk through 3 categories. So the first is this notion of we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We may take something off the shelf that's inherently dumb, and not in a derogatory way, but it's just not internet enabled, and we want to make it smarter somehow. So an example of this is the Belkin Wemo switch. So I can plug a hairdryer into this, I can plug a blender into this, I can plug my lamp that's in my dining room into this, and by virtue of that little adapter that I'm going to plug the dumb device into, the dumb device suddenly becomes smart. If my wife forgets to turn off her flat iron before she goes to work and we have it plugged into one of these Wemo switches, she doesn't have to turn around and come back to her house to figure out if she turned it off. She's like, oh, it shows here in my app on my smartphone, it's off, and therefore my flat iron is now smart. Another example of this smartening existing dumb devices is this Twine sensor. So Twine was, I think, either a Kickstarter or one of the other crowdfunding websites initially to get funding for creating this. And the idea is it can take humidity readings, it can take gyroscope readings, it knows if it's perpendicular or parallel to the ground. And so the interesting use case that a lot of people have done with this is they attach it to their garage door. And if they know the garage door is closed, it will be perpendicular to the ground. And they can log into a website on their phone and say, yep, I remembered to shut the garage door when I left this morning. Or, nope, it's parallel to the ground, that garage door is still open. It can also do things like in your laundry room. You put one of these sensors in there, and you'll know if the washing machine has overflowed because suddenly there's a ton of humidity in there that's atypical for that time of day. This next one is particularly interesting. So this is called the Tile sensor. It's a Bluetooth low energy device that has a companion app. And the idea is you could stick this on the back of your laptop, or maybe if you got a George Costanza wallet like me, maybe put a Tile sensor actually in your wallet. And if you break a certain radius from your Tile-enabled device with your smartphone, it'll say, hey, you left your laptop behind. Hey, you're leaving your wallet behind. But what's particularly unique about Tile relative to other devices like this is it creates a mesh network with other people who have tiles within proximity. And it will be able to communicate that proximity back to the internet. So if I go traveling to Shanghai and I lose my wallet and it has a Tile sensor in it, and then I fly back to America, but someone who stole my wallet with a Tile inside it gets close to another Tile user, it will send its location over to that Tile, send it to their smartphone, and then upload it to the cloud and saying, Justin, your stolen wallet is now in Hong Kong, of all places, and I will get a push notification on my device. So Bluetooth inherently is kind of a short communication protocol, no more than about 150 radius typically. But by virtue of pairing it with a smartphone, you actually are able to extend that quite worldwide. Now, if you're a hacker type or a do-it-yourselfer at heart, you may have heard of these devices, the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi. These are very low-cost pieces of hardware that are Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled that allow you to connect different sensors and motors to them. They start in the range of about $20 for one of these circuit boards. And then you can attach monitors to it if you want to teach your daughters programming, which is my selfish reason for buying a Raspberry Pi. But what a lot of folks have done are attach, again, motors to these. And then maybe they want to control their blinds, their dumb blinds. They attach a motor, the motor connects to the blinds that go up and down, and suddenly they have smart blinds. So there are a lot of different applications. There's a huge community around these devices too about hacking with Raspberry Pis, hacking with Arduinos. Interestingly, both of them are out of Europe, Italy and the UK respectively. So, but there's a lot of momentum here, I know, locally for hacking these devices. So that's one category, right? We're going to smarten existing dumb devices. But what if we want to go back to the drawing board and we want to rethink those old items in a more intelligent way? And you're probably thinking of some of these already. Maybe it's the light bulb. If you go to the Apple store in the back, they usually have one little section that are these sort of smart enabled devices. They have Philips Hue light bulbs, maybe they have the Nest thermostat, maybe they have the Withings smart body analyzer. The idea is you enable these things with a Bluetooth connection or a Wi-Fi connection, and suddenly you can do a lot of interesting things. Maybe I can turn it on and off, and I don't have to go through a Belkin Wemo switch to do it. I can affect individual light bulbs. If I have an overhead ceiling fan, maybe I want to manipulate each of those lights independently. What's interesting about the Hue and kind of its namesake is it's comprised of LEDs within the bulb, which unfortunately is kind of whited down here with the projector, but they can create different color palettes, and so you can have different mood lighting. Let's say I'm colorblind, so it doesn't really matter to me, but my wife may want to have a red hue in the background as we're having date night on Valentine's Day. So with the Hue, we could actually do that from our smartphone. I mentioned this one a second ago, the Withings, the original Wi-Fi enabled scale. My scale was not friendly to me this morning. I realized I probably should have spent more time at the gym, but the idea is every morning after I get out of the shower, I weigh in, and then it will send to the Withings Smart Cloud my weight data, my BMI data, and the carbon dioxide readings within my home. And then I'm able to access that on my smartphone, my iPad, or a web browser. You can see trends over time, but again, what's interesting is you've basically gone back to the drawing board, said, yeah, scales are interesting, but they could do a lot more for me and potentially change habits into something healthier. Now, I mentioned Nest a second ago. They're most well known for their thermostats. I know here locally, NRG has done a big push with television advertising because they've partnered directly with Nest. But last week, they started shipping this new device called the Nest Protect, a smoke alarm, and a carbon monoxide detector. And everybody has a horror story about how one of the smoke detectors in their home keeps doing that beeping noise. And you have no idea which one it is. That seems to happen to me at least once every 3 months. With this, you can check the battery levels within it from an app. You can see trends over time of temperature, the carbon monoxide levels within your house to see if maybe different times of year or more susceptible to these sorts of things. And it actually has, instead of a sort of alarm, it's emergency. There is a fire. It's a very pleasing tone. Apparently that is more effective from their user research. Now, door locks have gotten a lot of press within the industry right now, being the next thing to be enabled in a smart way. From top to here, we have the Goji, we have the August, and we have the Kwikset Kivo. These two are actually available on the market today, and they take different approaches for how they are going to have a smart lock. The Goji on top is a full-blown Wi-Fi enabled. I can unlock it from anywhere on the planet, and I can say, you can identify yourself with an app and say, it's my nanny, I'm coming to your front door, and pop, it'll unlock it for me. The Kwikset has different unique Bluetooth keys, is the way they talk about it. So each smartphone has a unique ID that will be a Bluetooth key, and I can say only my mom, my brother, and my wife can access my house, and all they have to do is wand their phone in front of the clock or in front of the lock, and it'll unlock. So staying at the front door for a moment, the Doorbot was something that got a lot of press over the summer. I love this thing. This is actually a lot of fun. So it's kind of a doorbell / intercom hybrid. And the idea is that you push it, and this runs on 4 AA batteries for the better part of 3 months, which blows my mind. They're clearly doing some interesting power efficiencies. But once you activate this, you'll get a push notification on your device. It will say someone's at your front door, swipe to unlock, and then suddenly you get the actual postman or whoever's at your front door having a conversation saying, I have a package for you, and then you can enable, if you pair this with something called the Lockatron, you can approve them and say, okay, go ahead and unlock the front door, all from this one app. It's actually really cool. So we talked about old devices rethought to be more intelligent, but now let's talk a bit for a minute here about new categories of devices. So something that wouldn't have even been possible in a meaningful way prior to some of these new emerging technologies coming to bear. And this is one that I found over the summer. I don't actually own one of these. Most of these I do, but this one I don't. This is called the I Wake You, as in waking up in the morning. And so it's kind of this glowing orb that you sit beside your bed, and it will mimic the natural sunrise and maybe some pleasing natural sounds to wake you up in the most optimal way. And it will understand where you are in the country or in the world, so it knows the actual sunrise and sunset times, it knows the weather conditions, and it will be able to optimally produce light and sounds in a way that hopefully will wake you up refreshed. The Ivy, think of this as Siri in an alarm clock. Okay, so this, it's in production now. It was originally a Kickstarter project that they debuted at CES 2013. The idea behind this is it will interface with your smart thermostat, it will interface with potentially your Roomba, it will interface with, what was the other one that they claimed? Nest, Roomba, I can't recall the third one now. But you can talk to it in a natural language in the same way that you do Siri on your device. So let's say you're making lunch in the kitchen and you got a bag of Doritos there and you spill the Doritos on the floor. You can say, Ivy, deploy the Roomba to clean up my mess. And then your Roomba will activate, if you have one in your house, and go and clean up the chips in the kitchen. And you're able to manipulate all of this, again, with your natural voice. Very reminiscent of what Xbox is trying to do with their Xbox One, but this is focused on integrating with existing smart devices that are already on the market. So you've got all these different services and apps and gadgets in there, and this is a screenshot last night of my phone that has some of the different apps that I'll use on a daily basis around my house, and each of them are kind of sandboxed, right? So there aren't the same manufacturer here in this 9 square grid here that they integrate or talk with each other. So Dropcam is its own company, Withings is its own company, Nest is its own company, and some of them are starting to provide their own APIs, application programming interfaces, to where you can create kind of interesting mashups, but by and large today they're very sandboxed. So if you're like me, you may think that sounds like an interesting business opportunity. And there is a company out of Boulder, Colorado that created a product that just launched last week called the Revolve. And think of the Revolve kind of like the Harmony remote for your entertainment center, but applied to your entire home. So let's say you come home on a Friday night and you want to, once the kids have gone to bed, you want to cook dinner for your wife and have a romantic evening, open a bottle of wine. You can create a macro on here, say romantic evening, and it will dim the Philips Hue lights in your house. It'll bring down the thermostat, make it a little more cuddly in the house. It'll turn on some romantic smooth jazz on the Sonos machine, and then you have this entirely new environment relative to when your kids were awake, and all you had to do was hit one button, as opposed to going into 4 different apps there to manipulate them individually. So kind of cool. Unquestionably a first world problem, having to launch 4 different apps to create the perfect environment, but again, a business opportunity for someone. So those are some of the technologies that exist today. But like I mentioned earlier, I like to think about where we're going next. So these things don't exist yet. They may never exist. I'm thinking just kind of in 1 to 2 years down the line, what makes sense naturally for this technology to evolve into. So one thing which I think will be really cool is this subject I'm calling thin notification centers. So if you go to a lot of modern office buildings today, maybe outside conference rooms, they have a little digital display and they talk about the upcoming meetings or events that are in there. And that makes a lot of sense in a corporate setting to where there are a lot of folks that are coming and going. But if we were to take a step back and think about that in the context of our own home, what if, because we're all carrying our individual cellular devices, the mom has one, the dad has one, the children probably have one if they're in their teens at this point, what if when they move through the house, if we had these little thin notification centers that would give them relevant information as they approach it? They don't have to do anything to activate it, but let's say I walk in at the end of the week and I'm curious what football games are on this weekend, and my home knows that I'm always curious about that on Friday afternoon. So as I come through my front door and I walk into my living room, maybe the sports schedule pops up for the week. And when my wife walks in, maybe she wants to know what's on her social calendar for the weekend, so her calendar events pop up. And so each of those can be personalized and tailored, and you don't have to do anything to actually get the data. It's naturally presented to you. Now that's an iPad that's mounted in a wall. That is overkill for what I'm talking about. We're thinking something more like a low-cost display. Think of the Pebble where you can get push notifications to your wrist. Similar to that. So it would be not high-tech. You don't need a ton of processors and sensors in there, just something to receive and display information. So to enable something like that, we're going to need highly precise indoor geofencing. So when you're out in the broader world, when you have a clear view of the sky, you can get your position triangulated based upon GPS satellites. And indoors, that becomes a very difficult problem to solve. You can kind of replicate that same sort of scenario if you're in an office setting and you have different routers and Wi-Fi hotspots. You can say, based upon signal strength, I'm at this place in XYZ space. But what we're seeing now a lot, and I mentioned iBeacons earlier, something that was new in iOS 7 and Apple's SDK, is we can create different low-energy Bluetooth devices and have something like this Toad sensor here. It runs on a coin cell battery. It'll last years, and all it does is emit a signal. And once you correlate that signal to a position within your home, you know as you get closer or further away to it where you are in 3D space. So if you think about that thin notification center example I gave you, maybe we have the house enabled with tons of these, one in every room, maybe multiple sensors in every room, and you can get very precise information about where users are in the home at any given time. Now, this next one is admittedly a bit more into the future and a bit more far-fetched. So I was late to the game watching the movie Cloud Atlas. Show of hands, anyone seen the movie? All right, I can tell you anything I want to then. So the idea, there was this scene in Cloud Atlas. It takes place at different centuries, both in the past and in the future. And one of these scenes is from, it's called Neo Seoul. It's Seoul, South Korea, about 150 years into the future. And I won't bore you with the plot details, but what really struck me as interesting is this character in the movie walks into a room. It's just barren. It's actually kind of dingy. It looks something like a dungeon. And the moment he walks in and something scans in front of his face, it recognizes who he is, and it completely transforms the environment around him. Instead of having a dingy wall in the back, it makes it into something very peaceful, something Far East with a wall hanging on the wall. There are different rugs that unfurl in front of him. They're probably virtual rugs, the way that it was displayed, or maybe some sort of smart fabric. The displays on the wall fade into the background. They look like windows, and it was all based upon that one scan. So you know the sort of smart carpet that you see in Las Vegas, if you've ever been out there, that'll look like arrows and they're directing people in the convention center where to go next. I mean, the technology already exists for this stuff. It's just a function of making it affordable. So in the future, maybe not my children, but maybe their children, this will be probably very affordable in every room of the house, to where you move through 3D space, and when I walk into a room, I have one setting, my wife walks into the same room another time, it's a completely different environment, and it's all automatic. So what are some of the other technologies which maybe aren't as obvious as being quote-unquote smart home tech, but are particularly relevant? So one of those is solar technology. This has gotten surprisingly affordable within the past 5 years. I don't know if maybe you looked at equipping your house with solar lights a decade ago, but it was somewhat cost prohibitive. I live in the Woodlands and I work in the Galleria area, so by definition I'm clinically insane. But I live in the Woodlands because it's a family setting and I feel like it's a safe sort of environment. And this summer on Memorial Day weekend, my house got shot at. I had bullet holes in my chimney and on my fence, and I woke up the next morning and I'm like, what has happened? I feel like I'm living in South Detroit now, which is about what my friends and family think, that we live inside the loop. They think the Woodlands is South Detroit. So I went overboard. I had a couple of drop cameras in my house. I added a ton more. I added lights all around my perimeter. When I come home at night, it looks like I'm landing at the airport. It's all motion activated, but I was wanting to make sure that my family was safe. And I was surprised. The drop cams are still fairly expensive, about $150 a pop. But I was able to put lights all around the perimeter of my house for the better part of maybe $150, and I'm talking dozens of lights. So these things have really dropped in price, and if you're looking to make it motion activated, I'm lumping that in as being somewhat smart. So in conjunction with getting solar lights installed all around my perimeter, I decided I was going to buy a gun for home defense. I was in the military and was never actually much of a marksman, but I thought maybe given the current circumstances, I want to have firearms to protect my family. So I have young daughters, and I didn't want it to be unprotected, obviously, in the home, so I bought a biometric safe with a fingerprint scanner and an override lock. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this the right way. But again, it was kind of a way to geek out with the biometric stuff, and this was predating the Touch ID sensor on the iOS devices, so at the time I felt like I was really techie and geeky, but also with a gun. That's a joke. Okay, tough crowd. Not in Texas, you're right. So electric vehicle charging. I work with a lot of folks who have electric cars at Chai One, kind of a forward-thinking crowd. And we're going to see a lot more of this. You know, Houston actually has a ton of these electric charging stations around the city already. I mean, we're kind of leading the country in a lot of ways. But the superchargers here for the Teslas to enable it to get charged rapidly, I mean, these are still somewhat cost prohibitive for it to become mass market once the once their product line expands and you get cars at lower price points. We'll be seeing a lot more of these coming as kind of like a built-to-order option when you're building a house. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of the presentation that I wanted to give you a kind of a hypothetical day in the life of a smart home. And this is how I'm interacting with a variety of apps and services. And this extends beyond the home a bit, all the way to when I'm going to the office. But I find when you tell a story, it can make it more real for folks. So this was very similar to my morning this morning, in fact, but not precisely. So I woke up, and it was about 4:50, and I got a notification on my iPhone saying, "It's cold in your child's nursery." And I'm like, okay, it's 4:50 in the morning, and I really don't feel like going upstairs. So I'm going to pull up my Nest app, and I'm going to raise the thermostat to make sure it's warm within their nursery. But I go to sleep for another maybe half hour, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, the holidays are coming up, and I really need to drop a few pounds. So I'm going to go run around the neighborhood. And so I'm wearing my Nike Fuel Band, and when I get done with my run, I click sync, and it pushes it up to the cloud, and I realize, okay, I'm making healthy decisions. I take a shower and I get out of the shower, and then I realize I haven't made the healthiest of decisions in the 2 weeks prior because I've gained 5 pounds. And so I really need to change my behavior and watch what I eat in a lot of ways. So step on the scale, get off the scale, realize I'm actually running pretty late, and my nanny is going to be here soon. I'm not dressed yet, and I don't want to walk out into my living room completely inappropriately, so I'm going to unlock my front door with my Lockatron. So I can just swipe and say unlock the front door, and she'll walk up to the door, and I never have to leave my living room. And then I finished getting ready, but I haven't left my bedroom yet. And I understand that my nanny likes to get my twin daughters up at a certain time to instill a schedule with them. And so I hear a ding on my phone, and I know she's entered the nursery. So I'm curious which of the twins she's going to pick up first, because I want to make sure she's not playing favorites between each one of them. So I pull up the live video footage from the drop cam in their nursery, and I see that she's gone to Elena, and the day before she had gone to Isabella, so I'm feeling pretty good. She's not playing favorites. So I put my watch on, and I look, and I've already got a notification from my boss. And I'm thinking, oh man, what's going on? And it turns out our meeting got rescheduled, so I actually don't have time for a full breakfast. I need to get to the office pretty quick. So I walk out to the living room, say hello to my children and my nanny, and I realize I need to figure out what the traffic conditions are, because maybe I'm going to take 45 to work, maybe I'm going to take the toll road. So I can't find the remote on my couch. Somewhere it has disappeared. So I pull up my smartphone, and I'm able to actually change the channel using my TiVo app. So I get the coffee, get in the car, and I realize I haven't read the news or pulled up Twitter in a while. So I dock my phone in the center console, and then on my display in the car, I get my current tweets that are going on that morning. And I find that a lot of relevant news is displayed on Twitter first thing during my commute. And I want to make sure I'm not speeding too much, even though the meeting is earlier than anticipated. So I've equipped my car with this automatic dongle, which will gamify my commute both to and from the Woodlands every single day. And ideally, I won't break the 70 mile per hour threshold for a variety of reasons. One, I would be speeding in some zones. Two, it's not the most fuel efficient way to drive your car. And if I want to make sure I'm not hard braking, I have data on that as well. So within short order, probably about 4 hours, I've interfaced with all these different services. I've interfaced with low-cost hardware like this automatic dongle. I've manipulated my thermostat. I've been able to watch what's happening with my children. And I admit I would love to see the children in the flesh more, but if I don't have the option for that every single day, at least I'm able to interface with them in a virtual way. So how did I learn about all this stuff? Again, this is more of a passion project of mine, not necessarily what I do professionally. So on the nights and weekends, I'm checking out sites like the Anvil Pack Store. This is a company out of the UK where they realized, much like Apple did by putting the back corner of the Apple Store all hardware and apps, this entire website is stuff you can commercially buy today that's about hardware plus apps. So things like the Nest, things that will enable your garage door to be controlled remotely from your phone. Gardening tools like the Kubachi. I'm sure I mispronounced that. So this is actually a great resource. Just Google Anvil Pack Store, and you can find it in short order. Now, one thing I didn't talk about are the kind of all-in-one systems that allow you to get all these home automation things done without piecing together your own solution in kind of a curated way. There are a variety of companies that will do this all for you. Most of the major ISPs here locally will do this for you too. So Comcast has their Xfinity home automation solution. AT&T had their pilot market here in Houston. This is a third-party non-ISP related one called SmartThings. They have sensors and cameras and dongles for pretty much any application you can think of. And they have different starter kits to where you don't have to wonder, what am I going to need? They'll come with a baseline camera and something that's similar to the Wemo switch where you can enable those dumb devices. So if you're just looking to dip your toe into the water, this is actually a pretty affordable and easy to set up solution. Another great resource for this is Kickstarter. If you go on Kickstarter and just search for smart home or iPhone or iPad, you'll see a ton of projects that are out there looking for backers. The downside to this is you can't really use it the same way you use Amazon.com, right? A lot of these things will never see the light of day. So you're going to have to understand your own threshold for investing in something if it may not come to fruition. But a lot of the projects that I've backed on there actually have everything from the Pebble to the Automatic to some of the other lower cost options. In addition to that, if you're looking to really get your hands dirty with something like the Arduino or the Raspberry Pi, Lifehacker is actually a really good resource for this. This blog has been around for a number of years, started by Gina Trapani, I think back in the early 2000s or a little bit before. Very searchable. You can search by different tags. Just search for Raspberry Pi or Arduino. You're going to get a ton of how-to guides out of this and a lot of links out to other resources. This is a good place to start. Now, I mentioned that Kickstarter you can't use the same way you use Amazon.com. GrandStreet is a solution where you kind of can. Most of the products that are sold on GrandStreet were originally Kickstarter projects, and a lot of them are very focused on smart home technology or mobile app-enabled accessories. So if you're looking for things that are already commercially available, you don't have to wait a year for to actually get in your hands, GrandStreet is a really good option. And then once you get all these devices and services set up, this will become your Candyland. A service called If This Then That. This If This Then That does for the layman what developers geek out about all day long. Leveraging different APIs to create interesting mashups to where a trigger will occur and something will become an output of that. So you can mash up everything from I check in at Foursquare and my light turns on in my home. Or I leave myself a voicemail and when I get to work, I'm going to have the light bulb on my desk turned on. I mean, there are just a ton of applications, and all you have to do is connect your various accounts to these, and you don't have to write a line of code. It's actually very easy. So, in conclusion, first we talked about some of the enabling technologies like 802.11ac and Bluetooth Low Energy. We talked about interesting use cases today in those three different categories: and smartening dumb devices, re-engineering existing devices, and then completely new devices. We talked about some of those possible future use cases all the way into 150 years in the future when you have your completely personalized environment around you. We talked about other technologies like solar and biometrics that are really going to enable your house to become even smarter as the years go by. We gave that little hypothetical scenario of what a day in the life of a smart home looks like, at least through my eyes, and then we talked through some of the recommended resources. We don't have sound in here, but I did want to close with this video. Some of you will remember this from the early 90s, the AT&T You Will campaign. Does that sound familiar to anyone? So for me, I was an adolescent by the time these hit the airwaves. This captured my imagination like no other ad campaign has. And that's saying a lot because AT&T isn't really known in a lot of ways for being the most innovative company. But this ad campaign and what they were envisioning was surprisingly spot on. So keep in mind when this was filmed, 93, 94, and then think about how applicable this is today. And I'm going to try to turn up my speakers as much as I can. Okay. Hopefully my tethering will hold up here. Let's just try refreshing it. Technical difficulties. Give me 1 second, folks. It looks like we're doing okay on time. If I can't connect here in a minute, I'll just tweet out the link later and everyone can watch it on their own time. Let's give this one more shot. It doesn't want to connect. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions. We obviously have about 25 minutes or so. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you guys have. Yes, sir.
So what's your take on Revolve, that hub that's kind of putting things together? It seems like pretty interesting.
So interestingly, and somewhat serendipitously, I guess, the previous presenter who was in here on the Google Glass presentation, I told him that I was presenting on smart home technologies, and he was actually an alpha tester for Revolve. I've been working with them through several versions of it leading up to the commercial release last week. I don't have one personally, but he did, and for the initial feedback I got was it's actually really stable. The UX could use a little work on the app, but it's very reliable in being able to interface with all those different third-party services. They don't have everybody yet. I mean, they have like Sonos on their roadmap. They already have Nest, and they have Dropcam as well. But they seem very committed to being able to integrate with everything. That's kind of their ambition. So it's a function of convenience, right? I mean, if you don't mind doing the finger dance on your phone, going to 20 different apps to enable exactly the setting you want, then maybe you don't need to pay $250 for it. But if that convenience premium is worth it, yeah, it's intriguing.
Yeah, I think that's when you look at these technologies, the challenge, like you said, they're all independent solutions.
Right.
Their own apps, and so I think that with the mobile phone, kind of the geolocation stuff that you're saying, that you move through life, the rules can be automatically controlling and changing and doing things based on that, making it more convenient. And proximity also is another kind of a fascinating thing, where you're going away from your home, you can set rules.
Correct.
There's a lower technology, so the thermostat, it does that, where as you move away from home, it changes your T-stat settings.
Right.
And as you come back. So rather than it being a function of I'm away or I'm home and then changing it, which is a bit too late.
Sure.
Back home.
Right.
This does it where I can say I'm 2 miles out.
You're absolutely right.
Based on that. So
that contextual awareness, I think, is what you're honing in. That's frankly fascinating stuff. I mean, it makes me very eager to see what developers and smart people are able to do with it. You know, the way I think of my iPhone right now is kind of the remote control to my life. But that's an odd metaphor to apply to it. We're still having to pet apps and everything, but if I can not make it the remote control of my life, but just kind of the knowledge of my life, and as I move very freely throughout my environment throughout the day at work and at home, it just knows. I mean, that's what's next. Right now I still have to peck.
Yeah. I think one of the things too, the old version of smart home was the home actually was smart. Today it's
the network is smart.
The network is smart. It
Yeah.
has controllers in it. And this is your representation of the home, it's you, sort of, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Back row, yes.
So, contrary to the Revolve side, is there any thought from a open protocol, mesh style communication networks out there?
I mean, the pioneers that I mentioned kind of early on, the X10s, the Zigbee. I mean, a lot of the
Those are all closed.
but they have gradually been open, right? They've become so entrenched as standards that it's kind of like Apple's FaceTime protocol, right? Eventually they want that to be an open source standard, but if it becomes the industry standard, they're going to have to open it up, even if it's not today. So stuff like X10 and Zigbee and Z-Wave, I mean, there are so many products that are using that. That has effectively become the de facto standard. It's not truly open, but because it's so... the proliferation of it was so vast, I mean, you kind of had to standardize on something. As far as new ones are concerned, I really haven't heard one emerge as the front runner. It seems natural over time that it would, right? Because typically that's the cycle of technology. But in my research, and again, this is more of a hobby than a profession, I haven't run across one. You got a question?
Well, it was kind of along the lines of how do you pull together? There's an ad on the radio, I think for Comcast, home monitoring.
Right.
That they say, simplify your life.
Right.
It really doesn't simplify your life. And I was wondering when, how can you figure out how it really will simplify your
Right.
life? I think the context awareness may
That's when it will become frictionless in a lot of ways, or a lot less friction. Now I'm still having to take manual. I have to express manual intent for something to occur. That's not exactly simple. It may be more convenient, but it's not truly simple. So I think once we get that contextual thing nailed, that's when you actually reach the panacea of simplicity. Yes, sir.
Have you encountered any building code notifications as yet?
I have not. We are building, like I mentioned to you earlier, a new office downtown here for my company, Chai One. I anticipate that we will need to do due diligence and research that when it comes to some of these. Just from almost a naive perspective, if I put 500 Wi-Fi enabled devices in my home, right, and maybe it's a 2,000 square foot home, that's a lot of noise, right? And hopefully it doesn't turn out Wi-Fi is bad for us because I'm hosed, if that's true. But over time, the Internet of Things as kind of a buzzword, you have to wonder if we hit a ceiling, right? Unless we're able to optimize those radio communications between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So that doesn't really answer your question about the building code, but it's something that I'm considering, right? If I have all this noise within my environment, what sort of negative impact does that occur? Do I get lower data transmission speeds? Do I have buffering when I want to actually watch video online? Because I have so many of these devices using bandwidth. So I think planning that in an intelligent way is a completely relevant concern.
Well, their interactions with the neighbors too.
There,
It's not just
that's true. That's actually a very valid point. My next door neighbor, I'm sure, gets tons of radio interference from my domicile. It's a legitimate concern. Yes, sir.
So what about the smart meter? Something I think everyone Houston has a smart meter now.
As far as being able to track your energy consumption,
Yeah. The tracking energy consumption and having these devices can make it easy.
right? It's none of them advertise that as kind of one of. I mean, Belkin does with some of their technology, saying it will only. You won't get that vampire power drain on your devices because it will only activate when you express intent to have it active. But yeah, honestly, I don't have a lot of depth of knowledge. I live in the Woodlands, and Entergy is the company up there, and we do not have smart meters, so I don't have firsthand interaction with it. But over time, I think that's a legitimate concern. The preceding guy that was in here talking about it, he works for NRG, and he was actually asking me at Chai One, do we think about the cost, the impact of energy consumption when we're developing apps? I said, actually, no. I mean, we've never really considered that. But if that's something you need to optimize over time, kind of your carbon footprint, being green, being a good ecological citizen, then yeah, you need the data to be able to make the right decisions.
And I guess more specifically, not getting like the macro level, going into the micro, so like how much is my energy consumed?
That's probably a scary answer to have at your
Well, it's smart meter won't tell you that either. It's whole house.
the whole house.
So actually, there are other vendors out there that are trying to solve that by different nodes. And
Yeah.
things you have to start in the development phase.
Sure.
Not development software, but development construction.
Right.
If you want to do that by hand, you can just buy a kilowatt meter. Smart. It costs $20.
go kill
It's
You're plugging it in the wall and you're
It's only good for about 110. Maybe you do 20 out there for your other stuff, but then you have to run a spreadsheet and do some tracking and so on and so forth. But a number of years ago, the cell phone charger used to be parasites. Today, I've tested a number of them. It doesn't exist.
Really.
You leave plug in, there's no drain whatsoever. A lot of things have changed. It costs about $5 to $7 for a refrigerator to run, even if you have a family. So the most abusive family is going to cost $6 or $7 or something like that. But the behavior that people going in and out of the house and other things can contribute to that. Washing machines are great; they're running about 2.5 cents a load. The biggest problem I see is housing construction.
Mm-hmm.
The building construction is getting dragged together a little bit, but they're not compartmentalizing the houses to heat this room and not that room. And I come from up north where we block off our windows with styrofoam boards almost.
Kind of like these windows, right?
Anyway, there's a lot more that can be done.
Sure.
In this area.
Yeah, I agree. And it's culture or an area like Houston, to where it's so hot, right? You have to run it so frequently. Your HVAC system. It seems like an opportunity, to minimize that and not have leaking of the actual power you're using.
I have reduced energy consumption from $4 to $10. I completely cut off the gas bill one time.
Wow.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I've done some other drastic things. You could do that here in Houston, but if nobody wants to listen, they don't understand ROI or anything.
Sure.
No, it's a giant pain in the butt. I mean, it's so really data. I have every circuit in my circuit breaker measured independently and monitored. I've had devices connected, so Cal used to be on my team.
Okay.
So I worked in energy, but the data was just completely overwhelming. I mean, I have more data on my own. I can't even keep up with it. My thermostats are Wi-Fi enabled. They're supposed to do everything in the cloud. And
Right.
They don't even tell me when they fail, right? So it's part of this technology. It's been in technology forever. It's a little bit disappointing as you go through. It's early steps.
Right.
And it's fun and all that, but some of it's a little cheaper now than it used to be. Right?
Sure.
But it's, it's sort of be careful what you wish for. But there are solutions that you can do. And it's not cheap to have it done for your whole home individually. But even with that, what do you do with it?
You're drowning in data.
Yeah, and it just frustrated me to no end. Right, when we ran analytics using all smart meter data against hundreds of thousands of homes in the Houston area and analyzed it with curves, looking at efficiencies in that, and identified, he was able to map homes by construction year, by weather zone, lots of factors and square footage and all that. And the basic net, maybe tracking over to is insulation, construction quality, HVAC, duct leakage. Everything else is so tiny within your home. Even
Right.
a refrigerator that's 15, 20 years old. So don't put refrigerators in your garage. Big giant waste of money. Just have beer delivered to your house. And have your HVAC checked. Make sure you're not cooling your attic with holes in your duct. And have it tuned up and insulation in the attic, if you have an older home, older than 1980, or actually older than 1990, usually has poor insulation. And some of those things can be done if you're a customer of Reliance. They'll have guys come out here home and do that. But there are tools if you really want to get into that.
Yeah, I guess not as you're concerned about the home, it's more about office space, commercial environments where that
Sure.
space, more rooms, AC, consoles. People, the employees, they don't. But if you have a lot of franchises
Right.
in the country, that's a lot of money that you could be losing. That you want to know it.
And there's great solutions actually that can do that. The commercial energy data is available from utilities pretty regularly across the U.S. And there are companies that will go and take all the data and analyze and compare each one to each one and
Years, I guess.
what's that?
Analyze each one.
Yeah, they can analyze building to building. Right? So say you take a franchise, right? Whatever, a subway to a subway, right? You can map it and
Thanks.
say, here's the extreme usage and here's the lower usage, and then you can go in and make, macro changes, and then you can go in and fine tune with very specific tools. So analytics can get you a lot of what you need. You just have to have the right platform providers to do it. And a lot of it's software as a service. Yeah, so it's pretty cool stuff. But I happen to go to technology. That's fine. Technology is fine tuning, but data can be macro.
And I want to hear more about your beer delivery service recommendations because that's
I just started. Yeah.
talk about business opportunities.
I'm sure you're afraid.
Anyone else? No? All right. Well, thanks for coming, folks. Hope you enjoyed it.